September 26, 1983, 12:14 a.m., Serpukhov 15, Moscow Oblast. The air inside bunker Oko 7 tastes like recycled fear and cigarette smoke. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Yevgrafovich Petrov sits 200 feet underground, watching phosphorescent green cursors sweep across 3 radar screens that collectively cost the Soviet state 47 million rubles. The temperature reads 22 degrees Celsius, but sweat darkens the armpits of his regulation uniform. Above ground, birch trees shed their September leaves across a facility that doesn't exist on any public map. Below, in this concrete tomb designed to survive American first strikes, 120 officers monitor the Oko early warning system, the technological tripwire between peace and thermonuclear annihilation. Petrov checks his watch, a Poljot Strela gifted by his father, an army colonel. The second hand sweeps past the 12. In 14 minutes, his shift officially ends. He's filled in for a colleague, and exhaustion presses against his eyes like thumbs. The screens show nothing unusual. Satellite Cosmos 1382, positioned in geostationary orbit 35,986 kilometers above the United States, transmits continuous infrared surveillance of American ICBM silos in North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming. The display remains dark green, the color of normalcy, of survival. Then the screen bleeds red. The master alarm howls, a sound engineered specifically to penetrate human psychology, to trigger instant adrenaline. Every officer in the bunker snaps upright. The computer terminal prints a single word in blocky Cyrillic. Pusk, launch. Petrov's mouth goes dry. The central screen displays what the system identifies as a Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile, originating from Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana. Launch confidence 100%. Flight time to Moscow, 28 minutes. His hands move to the red telephone on his right, the direct line to Soviet High Command, to General Yuri Votintsev at Strategic Rocket Forces headquarters, to the apparatus that will wake General Secretary Yuri Andropov and demand authorization for full counter-launch of the Soviet Union's 6,000 nuclear warheads. He doesn't pick up the phone. The Soviet Union has operated under a doctrine of launch on warning since 1974, a computer-assisted system designed to eliminate human hesitation during the 20-minute window between American launch and Soviet obliteration. Petrov's job isn't to think. His job is to report immediately and without interpretation what the computer declares. The protocol manual on his desk, GRU document 447 SR83, contains explicit instructions. Page 47, paragraph 6. Upon confirmed detection of hostile launch, duty officer will establish immediate contact with Strategic Rocket Forces Command within 60 seconds. Failure to report constitutes criminal violation of Article 276 Soviet Criminal Code, treason in wartime. The watch on his wrist shows 12:15 a.m., 54 seconds since the alarm. Something feels wrong, the Oko. Satellite Early Warning System represents the Soviet Union's most sophisticated attempt to match American detection capabilities in 1983. Officially designated USK, the network consists of 9 satellites deployed between 1972 and 1982, each equipped with infrared sensors designed to detect the thermal signature of ICBM rocket plumes during their boost phase. The first 180 seconds of flight when engines burn brightest and missiles are most vulnerable. The system cost the Soviet economy roughly 2.1 billion rubles across 11 years of development, involving over 4,000 engineers and physicists at the Lavochkin Design Bureau. But by September 1983, only 3 satellites maintain operational status. Cosmos 1382, launched April 1982, orbits above North America. Cosmos 1285 covers the Atlantic. Cosmos 1341 watches the Pacific. The network operates at 33% intended capacity, a fact known to senior GRU officials but not reported to the Politburo. Soviet leadership believes the system functions at full strength, that the technological shield protecting Moscow remains impenetrable. The official story told to duty officers like Petrov emphasizes certainty. During their 3-month training at the Zhukov Air Defense Academy outside Moscow, officers learned that Oko achieves 99.7% accuracy in detection. They study case files of successful test detections. American Titan II launches from Vandenberg Air Force Base, Minuteman III tests from Grand Forks. They memorize the thermal signatures. A Minuteman III produces 240,000 pounds of thrust, generating an infrared bloom detectable at 40,000 kilometers. The computer processes satellite data through 3 verification algorithms before declaring positive launch detection. False alarms, instructors insist, occur less than once per 10,000 operational hours. What officers don't learn: the satellites operate beyond their designed lifespan, their infrared sensors degraded by cosmic radiation. What they don't know: the verification algorithms contain a software error discovered in June 1983 but not corrected due to bureaucratic paralysis between the GRU and the Ministry of Defense. What remains classified until 1998. The entire Oko network experiences intermittent ghost detections, triggered by sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds, a phenomenon engineers call solar flare corruption, but never formally document. On September 26, 1983, the geopolitical stakes couldn't be higher. 3 weeks earlier, Soviet fighters shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007 over Sakhalin Island, killing all 269 passengers, including U.S. Congressman Larry McDonald. President Ronald Reagan called it an act of barbarism and expanded economic sanctions against Moscow. NATO conducts Able Archer 83, a command post exercise simulating nuclear release procedures, scheduled for November. Soviet intelligence, relying on reports from KGB Colonel Oleg Gordievsky in London, believes Able Archer might serve as cover for an actual first strike. GRU analysts briefed the Politburo that American hawks advocate decapitation strikes against Soviet command centers. Yuri Andropov, Soviet General Secretary since November 1982, suffers from chronic kidney disease. He governs from a hospital bed in Kuntsevo, receiving filtered intelligence summaries. KGB Chairman Viktor Chebrikov reports that CIA paramilitary teams have increased activities along the Soviet-Afghan border. Defense Minister Dmitry Ustinov warns that Pershing II missiles, now deploying to West Germany, can reach Moscow in 6 minutes, faster than Oko can detect them. The Soviet early warning system represents the only technological buffer between American surprise attack and Soviet annihilation. Stanislav Petrov, 44 years old, sits at the center of this machinery. Born in Vladivostok, son of a pilot who flew Il-2 Sturmoviks against the Wehrmacht, Petrov graduated from Kiev Higher Engineering Radio-Technical College in 1962. He joined the Soviet Air Defense Forces in 1963, specializing in satellite early warning systems. By 1983, he holds the rank of Lieutenant Colonel and serves as Deputy Chief of Combat Algorithms at Serpukhov 15. His expertise, understanding how computers interpret satellite infrared data. His official role on September 26th, duty officer, temporarily replacing a colleague hospitalized with appendicitis. His personnel file, declassified in 2013, notes exceptional technical competence, but also insufficient ideological reliability. Petrov never joined the Communist Party. He questions orders. He reads Samizdat literature. His commanding officer, Colonel General Yuri Votintsev, considers him brilliant but politically unreliable, exactly the type of officer who might hesitate during a genuine crisis. At 12:15 a.m., Petrov has no idea he's about to prove Votintsev right. The red telephone on Petrov's desk connects through a dedicated hardwired circuit to Strategic Rocket Forces headquarters in Moscow, 90 kilometers away. The protocol requires him to pick up, identify himself using the daily authentication code, September 26th, Granite 47, and recite the detection report exactly as displayed. The computer screen shows Minuteman III, single launch, Malmstrom AFB, confidence 100%, impact Moscow, T-minus 27 minutes. Petrov's hand moves toward the phone, then stops. His eyes scan the auxiliary screens showing raw satellite telemetry. Cosmos 1382 transmits its infrared data every 4.2 seconds. The computer should display the missile's trajectory, boost phase signature strengthening as the ICBM climbs through the atmosphere. Instead, he sees a single detection point frozen in position. Status check on Cosmos 1382, Petrov barks at Lieutenant Dmitry Golovko, the satellite communications specialist seated 3 meters away. I need confirmation on trajectory tracking. Golovko's fingers fly across his keyboard. Satellite telemetry nominal, Comrade Lieutenant Colonel. All systems. The screen erupts with a second red icon, then a third, fourth, fifth. 5 Minuteman III missiles, all launching from different locations. Malmstrom AFB, Minot AFB, Warren AFB, Grand Forks AFB, Vandenberg AFB. The computer recalculates. Combined strike confidence 100%. Time to Moscow impact 26 minutes. The master alarm howls continuously now, overlapping with secondary klaxons. Officers shout coordinates, verification codes, demand instructions. Someone drops a metal clipboard and the clang echoes through the bunker like a gunshot. Petrov stares at his watch. The Poljot Strela's second hand sweeps past the 6. 120 seconds since first detection. He should have reported 90 seconds ago. His hand still doesn't touch the telephone. The protocol makes absolute sense in theory. Early warning systems exist because nuclear missiles move faster than human decision-making. A Minuteman III covers 10,000 kilometers in 30 minutes. Soviet leadership needs 20 minutes to authenticate launch codes, transmit firing orders to 1,398 ICBM silos and 3 ballistic missile submarine fleets, and execute counter-launch. Every second of delay reduces response options. The system is designed around a fundamental assumption. Computers don't panic, don't hesitate, don't second-guess. Computers see launches and report them. But Petrov isn't thinking about protocol. He's thinking about probability. A genuine American first strike would not involve 5 missiles. American war plans, known from GRU intelligence summaries based on classified CIA documents stolen by agents like Aldrich Ames and William Pelton, call for massive coordinated attacks involving hundreds of Minuteman IIIs, submarine-launched Trident D5s, cruise missiles from B-52 bombers. The United States maintains 1,038 ICBMs, 640 submarine-launched ballistic missiles, 3,200 air-delivered nuclear weapons. 5 missiles couldn't destroy Soviet second strike capability. 5 missiles couldn't even guarantee destruction of Moscow, which is defended by the A-35 anti-ballistic missile system with 32 Galosh interceptor rockets. 5 missiles makes no strategic sense. Petrov knows something else, something never written in official protocols. Oko has problems. For 11 months, he's filed technical reports documenting intermittent false readings. In January 1983, the system flagged a Minuteman launch that turned out to be the space shuttle Columbia re-entering Earth's atmosphere. In May, it detected 3 missiles that were actually Delta IV rockets launching commercial satellites from Cape Canaveral. Each time, ground-based radar systems, the Duga-1 over-the-horizon radar network, showed nothing. Each time, the false alarm revealed itself within 180 seconds. Petrov looks at the radar integration screen. The Duga-1 radars, positioned near Chernobyl and in Komsomolsk-on-Amur, scan the horizon for incoming missiles using radio waves that bounce off the ionosphere. These systems are crude, vulnerable to atmospheric interference, but they provide independent verification. The Duga-1 screen shows nothing. No missiles, no launches, green across the board. "Get me correlation with Duga-1," Petrov snaps at Captain Viktor Pozorov, the radar integration officer. "I need independent confirmation." Pozorov's face goes pale. "Comrade Lieutenant Colonel, the protocol requires immediate report to Strategic Rocket Forces. Correlation analysis takes 4 to 6 minutes. We don't have—" "I said get me correlation." Petrov's voice cuts like a blade. He still doesn't pick up the red telephone. The bunker's ventilation system hums with mechanical indifference. Petrov watches the satellite telemetry screens, searching for trajectory data that should exist if 5 missiles are actually climbing toward space. Minuteman IIIs burn for 180 seconds during boost phase, traveling at velocities exceeding 7 kilometers per second. The infrared signature should intensify, should show Doppler shift as the missiles accelerate. Instead, the 5 red icons remain static on the screen, frozen like pixels in a broken video game. His watch reads 12:17 a.m., 3 minutes since first detection. The protocol mandates reporting within 60 seconds. By now, Strategic Rocket Forces should know. General Votintsev should be on the phone to Defense Minister Ustinov. Ustinov should be waking Andropov in Kontsevo Hospital. The Soviet nuclear response machine should be grinding toward launch authorization. But Petrov makes a calculation that has nothing to do with technology and everything to do with psychology. If he reports this detection and it's false, he triggers a chain reaction he cannot stop. Soviet doctrine requires immediate counter-launch upon warning, not after missiles impact, but during their flight. The Strategic Rocket Forces will not wait for ground radar confirmation. They cannot wait. By the time American warheads detonate over Moscow, Soviet ICBMs must already be airborne. Once Petrov picks up that telephone, once he speaks the authentication code and confirms detection, he puts 6,000 nuclear weapons on an irreversible trajectory toward the United States. If the computer is wrong, if these 5 blips represent sunlight reflecting off clouds or satellites misidentifying rocket launches from Vandenberg that are actually civilian weather satellites, then Petrov's phone call starts World War III. The weight of that decision presses against his chest like water at depth. "Comrade Lieutenant Colonel," Captain Pozorov's voice shakes. "Duga-1 correlation complete. Ground radar shows nothing, no launches, no incoming missiles. Confidence level, negative detection." The bunker goes silent except for the howling alarm. Every officer turns toward Petrov. The computer still displays 5 red icons, still prints Pusk in blocky Cyrillic, still insists with 100% confidence that American missiles are climbing toward Moscow. But the ground-based radar, older technology, less sophisticated but independent, sees nothing. Petrov reaches for the telephone, not the red one, the white one, the line to his commanding officer, Colonel General Votintsev at Strategic Rocket Forces. He picks up the receiver, listens to the dial tone, and speaks 6 words that violate every regulation in Soviet military doctrine. False alarm, satellite system malfunction, stand down. The next 4 minutes unfold in a haze of professional terror. General Votintsev screams through the white telephone, demanding explanation, threatening court-martial. Petrov, his voice steady despite his hands shaking badly enough that he has to grip the desk, recites his reasoning. 5 missiles indicate sensor error, not American first strike. Ground radar shows negative. Satellite telemetry displays static detection points, not trajectory progression. Confidence level doesn't match observable technical data. Votintsev demands to speak to the satellite engineer. Petrov hands the phone to Lieutenant Golovko, who confirms the telemetry anomalies. Static detection points violate physical laws. Missiles cannot hover in mid-flight. The infrared signature should evolve as the rocket burns fuel, but the satellite shows identical thermal readings at T+0 seconds and T+180 seconds. Impossible unless the Minuteman engines shut down immediately after launch, which would mean the missiles fell back to Earth in Montana. At 12:21 a.m., 5 minutes after initial detection, Cosmos 1382 transmits updated data. The 5 red icons vanish from the screen. No missiles, no launches. The display returns to dark green normalcy. The computer prints a single line. Detection error, solar reflection, high-altitude clouds. System reset initiated. Petrov's Poljot Strela reads 12:22 a.m. His shift ended 8 minutes ago. He sits at his desk for another 20 minutes, writing the incident report required by GRU Regulation 447 SR 83. His hand shakes so badly the Cyrillic letters look like seismograph readings. He describes the detection sequence, the lack of ground radar correlation, his decision to classify the alarm as system malfunction. He signs the bottom of page 3. Lieutenant Colonel S.Y. Petrov, Deputy Chief, Combat Algorithms Section, Serpukhov 15. What he doesn't write, what he doesn't know. His decision prevented the Soviet Union from launching a retaliatory nuclear strike that would have killed between 280 million and 340 million people in the first 48 hours. American intelligence estimates from the CIA's PSYOP 6F war plan, declassified in 2015, show that Soviet counterlaunch would have triggered full U.S. retaliation. 1,038 Minuteman missiles, 640 submarine-launched warheads, 3,200 air-delivered weapons. Soviet territory would have received 6,400 nuclear detonations totaling 8,000 megatons. American territory would have received 5,200 detonations totaling 7,100 megatons. Global atmospheric fallout would have reduced sunlight by 40% for 9 months. Agricultural collapse. Nuclear winter. The end of industrial civilization. Petrov prevented this by refusing to pick up a telephone. The technical investigation begins at 9 o'clock a.m., September 26th, 6 hours after the incident. Engineers from the Lavochkin Design Bureau arrive at Serpukhov 15 with portable diagnostic equipment. They spend 18 hours analyzing Cosmos 1382's telemetry data, downloaded from ground stations in Komsomolsk-on-Amur and Dushanbe. The diagnosis confirms Petrov's intuition. Solar reflection off high-altitude cirrus clouds created infrared signatures that matched the thermal profile of Minuteman III launches. The satellite's software, programmed to detect missile plumes, couldn't distinguish between reflected sunlight and rocket exhaust. The error occurred because Cosmos 1382 was positioned in an orbital slot where Earth's terminator, the line between day and night, aligned perfectly with American ICBM fields. At 12:14 a.m. Moscow time, 5:14 p.m. Montana time, the sun sat at a precise angle that reflected off cloud formations at 18,000 meters altitude, creating 5 distinct infrared blooms. The satellite's sensor, operating in the 4.3 micron wavelength optimized for detecting rocket exhaust, couldn't differentiate these reflections from actual launches. The second crucial factor, the verification algorithms. Declassified GRU documents from 1998 reveal that OCO's software contained a known bug in its multi-point correlation subroutine. When detecting multiple simultaneous launches, the system should have cross-referenced each missile's trajectory against ballistic flight profiles stored in its database. But the correlation subroutine, written in 1978 and never updated, failed when processing more than 3 simultaneous detections. Instead of performing trajectory analysis, it defaulted to displaying confidence 100% regardless of actual telemetry quality. Engineers discovered this bug in June 1983, 3 months before Petrov's incident. The fix requires uploading new software to all operational OCO satellites, a procedure that takes 40 days of testing and transmission time. The Ministry of Defense schedules the upgrade for November 1983 after completion of the Able Archer exercise. In September, the satellites operate with known defective code. Nobody tells the duty officers at Serpukhov 15. The GRU investigation expands through October 1983, involving interviews with all 120 personnel present in Bunker OCO 7 on September 26th. General Votintsev personally interrogates Petrov for 7 hours on October 4th. The session, documented in GRU files declassified in 2013, focuses on why Petrov violated protocol. Why didn't he report immediately? Why did he trust his judgment over the computers? Why did he risk Soviet security by delaying notification to strategic rocket forces? Petrov's responses, transcribed in the file, remain consistent. 5 missiles indicated system error, not American strategy. I assessed technical probability over computer. Certainty. I was trained to understand the algorithms. I understood they could fail. Votintsev writes in his report, Lieutenant Colonel Petrov demonstrated inadequate ideological discipline. His decision-making showed excessive reliance on personal judgment contrary to established protocol. While the incident outcome proved favorable, his methodology represents dangerous deviation from command structure requirements, recommends censure and transfer from early warning duties. The internal debate within the GRU reveals institutional paralysis. Senior officers recognized that Petrov's deviation prevented catastrophic error, but officially praising his insubordination would validate protocol violations, potentially encouraging other officers to second-guess computer systems. The Soviet military chain of command depends on absolute obedience. Individual initiative, particularly initiative that contradicts technological authority, threatens the entire doctrine of computerized early warning. The compromise, silence. The GRU files the incident as classified, GRU SR 44683, security designation Osoboy Vajnosti, top secret. Petrov receives neither commendation nor court-martial. He's removed from active duty in Serpukhov 15 and reassigned to software analysis at a research facility in Frunze. His personnel file notes health reasons as justification for transfer. He receives no medal, no official recognition, no acknowledgement that his decision saved the world. But the incident triggers policy changes that never reference Petrov's name. In December 1983, Defense Minister Ustinov issues Order 44783 DMO, requiring all satellite early warning detections to receive ground radar confirmation before reporting to strategic rocket forces. The launch-on warning doctrine remains official policy, but now includes a 120-second verification window. OCO satellites receive software upgrades throughout 1984, correcting the correlation subroutines and adding cloud reflection filters. The changes are implemented quietly, buried in technical amendments to existing protocols. No public announcement, no Politburo discussion. The Soviet government never acknowledges that its early warning system nearly triggered accidental nuclear war. In Washington, American intelligence knows nothing about September 26, 1983. The National Security Agency monitors Soviet communications but doesn't detect unusual activity that night. CIA analysts in Langley study Soviet nuclear doctrine but don't learn about Serpukhov 15's false alarm until 1998, when Russian officials first discussed the incident publicly. For 15 years, the United States remains unaware that Soviet early warning systems experienced catastrophic failure during the most dangerous period of the Cold War. The only evidence of the incident exists in classified GRU files locked in Moscow archives and in the memory of 120 Soviet officers who signed non-disclosure agreements threatening 20 years imprisonment for unauthorized revelation. They carry the secret through the remainder of the Cold War, through Mikhail Gorbachev's glasnost reforms, through the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991. They know what almost happened. They know how close the world came to ending. They never speak about it. Stanislav Petrov lives in a small apartment in Frunze through 1984 and 1985, analyzing satellite software algorithms and training new engineers. His wife Raisa notices he drinks more vodka, sleeps poorly, wakes from nightmares about telephones. He never explains why. In 1986, he requests early retirement from the Soviet Air Defense Forces, citing chronic nervous system problems. The military grants his request with a pension of 210 rubles per month. He returns to Moscow and finds work as a software consultant. He never tells his family what happened at Serpukhov 15. The revelation comes slowly, incompletely, like archaeology excavating layers of secrecy. The first public disclosure occurs on May 23, 1998, when Russian journalist Vladimir Khabarov publishes an article in Trude newspaper titled "The Man Who Saved the World." Khabarov interviewed General Yuri Votintsev, now retired, who described the September 1983 incident in general terms without naming Petrov. The article generates minimal attention. Buried on page 7, 140 words, no follow-up. But Khabarov's piece reaches retired Colonel Mikhail Smirnov, who served as radar integration officer at Serpukhov 15 in 1983. Smirnov contacts Khabarov, provides Petrov's name, confirms details. In September 1998, Khabarov publishes a second article, this time identifying Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov as the officer who refused to report the false alarm. The article runs 800 words. Russian television ignores it. Western media discovers the story through an unlikely route. In January 1999, American physicist Theodore Postel, MIT professor and nuclear weapons analyst, reads Khabarov's article while researching Soviet early warning systems. Postel contacts Russian colleagues, verifies details, and publishes an analysis in Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists in May 1999. The article Near Miss in 1983 reveals Soviet warning system flaws, identifies Petrov by name, and describes the incident's technical details. The Washington Post picks up the story on June 18, 1999. Soviet officer averted nuclear war, report says, runs on page A16. The article quotes Postel. "We came within minutes of nuclear war due to Soviet computer malfunction. An officer named Stanislav Petrov made a judgment call that saved potentially hundreds of millions of lives. The United States never knew we were that close. Petrov, 60 years old, living in a two-room apartment in Frunze, learns about the publicity when Western journalists start calling. He hasn't thought seriously about September 26, 1983 in 15 years. The memories return with the phone calls, the red screen, the howling alarm, his hand hovering over the telephone, the knowledge that picking up that receiver might end human civilization. He gives his first interview to Reuters in August 1999. He's uncomfortable, reluctant, insists he doesn't deserve attention. I was just doing my job, he says. I analyzed the data. I made an assessment. Anyone with technical training would have done the same. But the interviewer presses, why didn't you follow protocol? Why risk your career, possibly your freedom, by refusing to report what the computer showed? Petrov's answer, documented in the Reuters transcript, I didn't trust the computer completely. I knew the system had problems. I knew 5 missiles made no sense. And I knew that if I was wrong about reporting it, I would be blamed. But if I was wrong about not reporting it, he pauses. If I was wrong about not reporting it, there would be no one left to blame me. The international recognition grows gradually. In 2004, the Association of World Citizens awards Petrov its World Citizen Award at a ceremony in San Francisco. Petrov, now 65, travels to the United States, his first visit to the country he nearly helped destroy. He meets American nuclear weapons specialists who explain what would have happened if Soviet missiles launched 184 million American casualties in the first day, 67 million Soviet casualties, global fallout, nuclear winter, agricultural collapse. Petrov listens quietly. When asked how he feels about preventing this, he says, I feel nothing. What happened happened. I made a decision based on technical analysis. I'm not a hero. I just understood the computer better than the computer understood itself. In 2006, the documentary The Man Who Saved the World premieres at the Sundance Film Festival. Director Peter Anthony documents Petrov's story, interviewing former Soviet officers who were present at Serpukhov 15. The film includes footage of Petrov visiting the United States, meeting with Robert De Niro and Kevin Costner, who both praise him, receiving awards he doesn't understand why he deserves. The documentary reveals what declassified GRU files confirm. Petrov received no commendation from the Soviet government, was removed from active duty, lived in relative poverty through the 1990s. Western journalists investigate why the Soviet Union never recognized Petrov's role. The answer lies in institutional embarrassment. Acknowledging Petrov means acknowledging that OCO failed catastrophically, that Soviet early warning systems operated with known defects, that computerized launch-on warning doctrine nearly destroyed the world. The GRU preferred silence to admission of systematic failure. In September 2013, Petrov receives the Dresden Peace Prize at a ceremony in Germany. He's 74 years old, suffering from diabetes and hypertension. He tells the audience, I'm an ordinary person who happened to be in an extraordinary situation. I don't want to be called a hero. I want people to understand that nuclear weapons and computer systems together create situations where one person's decision determines everything. That's not heroism, that's a failure of policy. The ceremony includes testimony from former Soviet officers who worked at Serpukhov 15. Captain Viktor Pozorov, now 65, describes the moment when Petrov refused to pick up the red telephone. I thought he would be arrested immediately. I thought we might all be arrested. But I also thought, if he's wrong, if those are real missiles, we'll be dead in 20 minutes and arrest won't matter. When the false alarm was confirmed, I realized Stanislav had saved my life, my family, everyone. But I couldn't thank him. It was classified. Lieutenant Dmitry Golovko, 67, confirms the technical details. The satellite data showed static detection points. No trajectory progression. I knew something was wrong technically, but I never thought to question the computer's conclusion. Stanislav understood the system well enough to recognize the error. That's why he was deputy chief of algorithms. He knew how the technology could fail. General Yuri Votintsev, 86, speaks about his interrogation of Petrov in October 1983. I was furious that he violated protocol. I believed protocols existed precisely to prevent individual decision-making during crisis. But later, when I understood what the computer had shown and what Stanislav had prevented, I realized our protocols would have killed us all. He saved the Soviet Union by disobeying. But declassified GRU documents tell a different story about Votintsev's role. Files released in 2015 show that Votintsev recommended Petrov for court-martial in November 1983, charging him with failure to execute duties during combat situation. The recommendation went to Defense Minister Ustinov, who rejected it after reviewing the technical investigation. Ustinov's handwritten note on the file. Officer showed initiative and technical competence. Incident reveals system flaws, not personnel failure. No prosecution. Petrov never knew about Votintsev's court-martial recommendation. He learns about it in 2015 when a Russian historian contacts him with copies of the declassified files. His response, I'm not surprised. Votintsev was a good officer who believed in the system. I violated the system. From his perspective, I deserved punishment. The most significant revelation comes from CIA documents declassified in 2018 under Freedom of Information Act requests. The files show that American intelligence knew about Soviet early warning system problems as early as 1981. Signals intelligence from NSA listening posts in Turkey intercepted Soviet communications discussing OCO satellite malfunctions. CIA analysts assessed that Soviet early warning operated at degraded capability with high probability of false detections, but the CIA never informed U.S. policymakers about these vulnerabilities. The intelligence remained classified, never reaching President Reagan, never influencing American nuclear strategy. In September 1983, when Petrov faced his decision at Serpukhov 15, American leaders had no idea how fragile Soviet detection systems actually were. The CIA's rationale: revealing this intelligence might compromise sources and methods, but declassified memos showed deeper reasoning. National Security Council staffers believed that Soviet awareness of their own system vulnerabilities would prompt improvements, potentially making Soviet early warning more reliable and reducing American first strike advantages. Better for the Soviets to operate with defective systems than to fix them. This logic nearly destroyed the world. American intelligence agencies protecting sources and strategic advantages allowed Soviet early warning to operate with known flaws. Soviet early warning operating with those flaws nearly triggered World War III. Petrov's refusal to follow protocol prevented a catastrophe that both superpowers had inadvertently constructed through secrecy, bureaucracy, and technological over-reliance. Robert Gates, CIA Deputy Director in 1983 and later Secretary of Defense, addressed this in his 2011 memoir. We knew Soviet systems were unreliable. We didn't know how unreliable. We certainly didn't know they came within minutes of launching based on false alarms. If I had known in 1983 what I learned in 1999, I would have pushed for immediate crisis communications with Moscow to establish better verification protocols. But we didn't know. We operated blind to the greatest danger we faced. The impact of September 26, 1983, reshapes Cold War nuclear doctrine in ways neither superpower acknowledges publicly. Within the Soviet Union, Defense Minister Ustanov's December 1983 order requiring ground radar verification before reporting satellite detections fundamentally alters launch-on-warning procedures. The change adds 120 seconds to the response timeline, potentially lethal during genuine attack, but essential for preventing false alarm launches. Soviet nuclear strategists recognize the dilemma. GRU studies from 1984, declassified in 2014, analyze the trade-off. Faster response increases survival probability during real attack, but magnifies catastrophe risk during false detections. The studies conclude that computerized early warning creates systemic vulnerability to technological error with genocidal consequences. The recommendation: reduce reliance on automated systems, increase human verification requirements, abandon launch-on-warning doctrine. The Politburo rejects these recommendations. Launch-on-warning remains official Soviet policy through 1991 despite its near-catastrophic failure in 1983. The political logic: abandoning the doctrine signals weakness to the Americans, potentially inviting first strike temptation. Better to maintain the deterrence posture, accept the false alarm risk, and hope for officers like Petrov when systems fail. The Soviet early warning network receives substantial upgrades throughout 1984 and 1986. The OCO satellites get new software filtering. Cloud reflection artifacts. Ground-based radar systems receive improved processing algorithms. The GRU establishes a new verification protocol. 3 independent detection systems must confirm launches before reporting to strategic rocket forces. Cost: 840 million rubles. Implementation timeline: April 1984 through March 1986. These upgrades occurred during the most dangerous period of the Cold War. In March 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev becomes General Secretary and begins tentative steps toward detente. But military modernization continues. The Soviet Union deploys RSD-10 Pioneer intermediate-range missiles throughout Eastern Europe. The United States counters with Pershing II deployments in West Germany. Both sides field new submarine-launched missiles with improved accuracy and reduced flight times. The window for human decision-making shrinks throughout 1985 to 1986. Pershing II missiles, based 600 kilometers from Moscow, have 6-minute flight times. Soviet submarines equipped with R-29RM missiles patrol 280 kilometers off the American coast. Their weapons capable of reaching Washington in 7 minutes. Early warning systems on both sides operate under compressed timelines that leave almost no margin for human verification. The Soviet upgrades triggered by Petrov's incident marginally improve detection accuracy, but they cannot solve the fundamental problem. Missiles move faster than human judgment. In October 1986, Reagan and Gorbachev meet at Reykjavik, Iceland. The summit produces no formal treaty, but private discussions between the leaders reveal how close both sides came to disaster. Gorbachev describes Soviet early warning challenges in general terms, not mentioning Petrov or September 1983 specifically, but acknowledging that technological systems create dangerous opportunities for miscalculation. Reagan, briefed by his advisors about American early warning limitations, agrees to establish the Nuclear Risk Reduction Centers, dedicated communication channels designed to clarify ambiguous situations. The NRRCs become operational in April 1988, connecting Washington and Moscow through secure teletype circuits. The centers handle notifications of missile tests, satellite launches, military exercises, anything that might trigger false alarms in early warning systems. Between 1988 and 1991, the NRRCs processed 437 notifications, preventing at least 12 incidents where routine activities might have been misinterpreted as hostile actions. American early warning undergoes its own evolution. In January 1984, 4 months after Petrov's incident, though U.S. officials don't know about it yet, NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain Complex experiences a false alarm when a training tape simulating Soviet missile attack is accidentally loaded into the actual warning system. For 6 minutes, duty officers see displays showing 2,200 Soviet ICBMs inbound. The error is caught before notification reaches the president, but the incident prompts a comprehensive review of American early warning procedures. The resulting reforms parallel Soviet changes: multiple verification requirements, mandatory cross-checking between satellite and ground radar, increased human oversight of automated systems. The North American Aerospace Defense Command implements new protocols in July 1984 requiring 3 distinct detection confirmations before declaring tactical warning. The changes add approximately 180 seconds to the decision timeline. Neither superpower realizes they're solving the same problem, the problem of trusting computer systems with civilization-ending decisions. The solutions emerge independently, driven by classified incidents that neither side discusses with the other. The reforms make nuclear war marginally less likely, but the fundamental architecture remains. Thousands of missiles on high alert, early warning systems with inherent vulnerabilities, leaders facing compressed decision timelines measured in minutes. The human cost of this system extends beyond Petrov. Research conducted by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists in 2017 identifies at least 11 documented incidents between 1979 and 1991 where false alarms in American or Soviet early warning systems created potential crisis situations. Most involved computer errors, satellite malfunctions, or misidentified radar signals. Each required human officers to overrule automated systems or demand additional verification. The officers' names remain largely unknown, classified in archives, unrecognized by their governments, living ordinary lives after making decisions that preserved the world. Petrov's uniqueness lies not in his decision-making but in the eventual publicity. The others stayed hidden. In 1995, Russian radar detected what appeared to be a Trident missile launch from Norwegian waters, actually a scientific rocket studying the northern lights. Boris Yeltsin became the first Russian leader to activate the nuclear briefcase containing launch codes. The duty officer at the Olenogorsk early warning station, Major Sergei Grushko, insisted on waiting for trajectory confirmation before declaring attack status. The rocket fell harmlessly into the ocean 180 seconds later. Grushko received no medal, no recognition, no documentary. He retired in 1998 with a standard military pension. In 2007, Russian radar systems detected missile launches from the Mediterranean, actually Israeli jets releasing electronic countermeasures during exercises. The duty officer at the Armavir radar station, whose name remains classified, refused to escalate the detection until satellite confirmation proved negative. No public acknowledgement, no international recognition. Just another day when one person's judgment prevented potential catastrophe. These incidents reveal the systematic problem that Petrov's case illuminates. Nuclear deterrence depends on fallible technology monitored by human beings who must make perfect decisions under extreme pressure with incomplete information. The system worked in September 1983, not because protocols functioned correctly, but because one officer had sufficient technical expertise and moral courage to violate those protocols. That's not deterrent stability. That's luck. The policy legacy manifests in arms control negotiations. After Petrov's story becomes public in 1999, nuclear strategists revisit Cold War history with new understanding. The 2010 New START Treaty between the United States and Russia includes provisions specifically addressing early warning. Article 5 requires both nations to provide biannual notifications of ballistic missile launches, and Article X establishes the Bilateral Consultative Commission to discuss ambiguous situations. These clauses directly descend from recognition that technological early warning systems cannot guarantee accurate threat assessment. Modern nuclear doctrine incorporates Petrov principles, though never called that officially. The U.S. Strategic Command maintains that no automated system can authorize nuclear weapons release. Human authorization remains mandatory at multiple levels. Russian doctrine, reformed under President Vladimir Putin in 2000, officially abandons launch on warning for a launch under attack posture, theoretically waiting for actual detonations before retaliating, though operational reality remains classified. But the fundamental tension persists. As of 2025, the United States maintains approximately 1,750 deployed strategic nuclear warheads. Russia maintains 1,710. Both nations keep hundreds of weapons on high alert, capable of launching within 15 minutes of attack warning. Early warning systems have improved. Better satellites, advanced radar, sophisticated computer algorithms. But improved technology creates its own vulnerabilities. Modern systems generate more data, require more complex analysis, offer more opportunities for software errors or cyber interference. The nuclear weapons research community now studies Petrov scenarios, situations where correct human judgment must override incorrect technological conclusions. A 2019 study by the RAND Corporation identifies 43 potential Petrov scenarios in contemporary nuclear operations. GPS spoofing that simulates missile trajectories, cyber attacks that manipulate early warning data, space debris misidentified as warheads, hypersonic weapons that compress decision timelines below human response thresholds. Each scenario requires human operators to recognize system failure and reject false warnings. But the RAND study notes a crucial problem. Contemporary military culture increasingly trusts automated systems over human judgment. Modern officers train with simulation software that demonstrates 99.97% computer accuracy. They receive institutional messages emphasizing technological reliability. When systems and humans disagree, doctrine favors the system. Petrov's decision, trusting human analysis over computer certainty, represents an increasingly rare mindset in militaries that prioritize automated decision-making. The technological trajectory points toward greater automation, faster response, reduced human intervention. Artificial intelligence systems now assist early warning analysis, processing sensor data thousands of times faster than human operators. The U.S. Space Force's experimental AI warning system, tested in 2024, can detect and classify missile launches in 0.3 seconds, far faster than human perception. Russian systems incorporate similar AI-enhanced analysis. These systems will eventually face their own Petrov moments, situations where algorithms confidently declare attack and human operators must decide whether to trust silicon or instinct. Petrov's life after September 1983 embodies this tension between recognition and obscurity. After receiving international awards, he returns to his Moscow apartment and lives on a monthly pension of 14,200 rubles, approximately $180 in 2017 currency values. He develops diabetes, requires regular medication, survives on savings and occasional financial support from American peace organizations. The Russian government provides no special pension, no official recognition, no acknowledgement that he prevented Soviet annihilation. In 2012, a Swiss journalist asks Petrov if he resents the lack of Russian recognition. His response, "The government that would have thanked me doesn't exist anymore. The Soviet Union disappeared. The officers who knew what happened are dead or scattered." What remains? Some declassified files, some old men's memories, some journalists who want to write about the man who saved the world. He pauses. "I didn't save the world, I just refused to destroy it based on incomplete information. That should be normal, not heroic." His wife Raisa died in 1997, 6 years before international recognition arrived. She never knew her husband's role in history. Petrov's 2 adult children living in Moscow and St. Petersburg learned about September 1983 from Western journalists, not from their father. His son Dmitry, interviewed in 2015, says, "Growing up, I knew my father worked in the military, something with satellites. He never discussed specifics. After 1999, when the story came out, I asked him why he never told us. He said, 'What was there to tell? I did my job correctly. The system was broken. I recognized that. Talking about it would have been illegal and pointless.' That was very much my father, practical, technical, emotionally reserved." The psychological cost of Petrov's decision remains largely unexplored in public accounts, but interviews conducted between 2006 and 2017 reveal persistent trauma. He describes recurring nightmares about the red telephone, about picking it up and speaking the words that would launch 6,000 missiles. He describes phantom sensations of his hand hovering over the receiver, the physical paralysis of knowing that one gesture determines everything. He describes drinking vodka to quiet these memories, sleeping poorly, avoiding discussion of nuclear weapons entirely for years. A 2013 interview in Der Spiegel captures his emotional state. "People call me a hero. Heroes make brave decisions. I made a technical assessment. I analyzed data. I concluded the computer was wrong. But afterwards, for years, I thought, what if I was wrong? What if those were real missiles and I did nothing? What if my analysis killed millions of Soviets because I was too proud to trust the system? That thought doesn't leave you. It lives in your mind forever, asking, were you right or were you just lucky?" This psychological burden affects other early warning officers whose decisions shaped history. Major Sergei Grushko, the 1995 officer who hesitated during the Norwegian rocket incident, reportedly developed severe anxiety disorder and retired early from military service. American officers who experienced false alarms at NORAD described similar symptoms: hypervigilance, decision paralysis in unrelated contexts, persistent fear of having made catastrophic errors. The nuclear command system creates what psychologists now term Petrov syndrome, a form of acute stress disorder specific to operators who must make civilization-ending decisions based on ambiguous evidence. The DSM-6 diagnostic manual, published in 2024, includes preliminary criteria for existential decision trauma, psychological harm resulting from life-or-death decisions affecting massive populations. The research draws extensively on interviews with early warning officers, nuclear submarine commanders, and other military personnel who controlled weapons of mass destruction. Petrov's case appears in the clinical literature as the defining example. A person who made the correct decision received eventual vindication, yet suffered decades of psychological consequences. Stanislav Yevgrafovich. Petrov dies on May 19, 2017, at age 77 in his Moscow apartment. The death goes unreported for 4 months. His body is discovered by a neighbor concerned about mail accumulating outside his door. Russian authorities notify his children, who arrange a small funeral attended by 17 people, family members, a few former military colleagues, 2 journalists who had interviewed him over the years. The New York Times publishes his obituary on September 18, 2017. Stanislav Petrov, Soviet officer who helped avert nuclear war, dies at 77. The article runs 1,200 words, describing September 26, 1983 in detail, noting his subsequent recognition by Western organizations, acknowledging that the Russian government never officially honored his decision. The obituary concludes, Mr. Petrov's death was not immediately announced. He died largely as he had lived since 1983, in obscurity, known to specialists and historians, but invisible to the vast populations whose existence his judgment preserved. The Washington Post, The Guardian, and BBC News publish similar obituaries. Russian media provides minimal coverage, a 140-word notice in Rossiyskaya Gazeta, no television coverage, no government statement. The contrast illuminates Cold War memory politics. Western nations celebrate Petrov because his story validates narratives about Soviet technological failure and individual heroism overcoming authoritarian systems. Russia ignores him because his story reveals embarrassing truths about early warning incompetence and near-catastrophic doctrinal failures. But within nuclear policy circles, Petrov's death prompts reflection about ongoing risks. In October 2017, the Union of Concerned Scientists publishes a report titled 44 Minutes, How Close Are We to the Next Petrov Scenario? The analysis examines contemporary early warning systems, identifying multiple vulnerabilities, aging satellite networks, software complexity that creates unpredictable failure modes, compressed decision timelines that reduce human oversight opportunities, cyber threats that could manipulate sensor data. The report concludes that modern early warning operates under greater systemic risk than 1983 systems. We have more satellites, better computers, faster communications. But we also have more complexity, more automation, more dependence on software that no single person fully understands. In 1983, Stanislav Petrov could analyze satellite telemetry and recognize anomalies because the system was simple enough for human comprehension. Today's systems process data through artificial intelligence algorithms, cloud computing networks, and quantum encrypted communications that operate beyond human verification capability. The next Petrov scenario may not offer a human operator the opportunity to override the machine. This concern manifests in recent nuclear policy debates. In 2019, the United Nations convenes a conference on reducing nuclear risk in an age of technological complexity. Delegates from 37 nations discuss early warning vulnerabilities, false alarm incidents, the need for improved verification protocols. The conference produces a non-binding declaration calling for maintenance of human decision-making authority in nuclear command and control systems, and international cooperation to prevent early warning errors. The declaration references Petrov's case specifically in paragraph 14. Recognizing that incidents such as the September 1983 false alarm in Soviet early warning systems demonstrate the catastrophic potential of technological failures, and acknowledging that human judgment by duty officer Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov prevented potential nuclear exchange, participating nations commit to ensuring that automated systems do not remove human operators from critical decision pathways. Russia abstains from endorsing the declaration. The United States signs with reservations, noting that operational security requirements may limit implementation of verification protocols in certain scenarios. China refuses to participate, citing interference in sovereign nuclear doctrine. The declaration carries no enforcement mechanisms, no verification requirements, no substantive impact on nuclear operations. It remains a symbolic gesture, recognition that the problem exists but insufficient political will to solve it. Meanwhile, technology continues evolving faster than policy. In 2023, the U.S. Department of Defense begins testing AI-enhanced early warning systems that process satellite data through neural networks trained on decades of historical missile launches. The system promises 99.99% accuracy, far better than 1983 technology. But nuclear weapons analysts note that 99.99% accuracy with 10,000 annual alerts still produces 10 false alarms per year. At what confidence threshold should human operators trust the machine? 99%? 99.9%? 99.99%? Petrov faced a system claiming 100% confidence and correctly doubted it. The Chinese military develops quantum radar early warning networks that detect missile launches through quantum entanglement effects, theoretically immune to electronic countermeasures. The Russian strategic rocket forces deploy the new Tundra satellite constellation, replacing aging OCO systems with advanced infrared sensors. Each technological improvement promises greater reliability, faster response, reduced false alarm rates. Each improvement also increases system complexity, reduces human comprehension, and narrows the window for Petrov-style intervention. The fundamental paradox remains unsolved. Nuclear deterrence requires credible threat of immediate retaliation, but immediate retaliation requires trusting early warning systems that cannot achieve perfect reliability. Human oversight reduces false alarm risk but slows response time, potentially inviting successful first strikes. Automation increases response speed but magnifies consequences when systems fail. Petrov's decision in 1983 demonstrated that human judgment can correct technological error, but also that such correction depends on individual initiative that violates protocol and cannot be systematically guaranteed. Contemporary military theorists debate whether another Petrov would emerge in modern circumstances. Would today's officers, trained in an era of technological supremacy and automated systems, possess Petrov's skepticism toward computer certainty? Would institutional culture permit the kind of protocol violation that saved the world in 1983? Would the compressed timelines of modern hypersonic weapons even allow human deliberation? These questions remain unanswered because the next Petrov scenario may unfold differently. In 1983, the false alarm was obvious enough that a technically competent officer could recognize it through telemetry analysis. Future false alarms might be more sophisticated. Cyber attacks that manipulate data across multiple systems, AI-generated false signals that perfectly mimic genuine launches, satellite malfunctions, that create consistent but incorrect detection patterns. The next duty officer facing the next red screen might not have the information quality that allowed Petrov to doubt the machine. The watch sits in a display case at the Cold War Museum in Warrenton, Virginia. Petrov's son donated the Poljot Strela chronograph in 2019, 2 years after his father's death. The museum curator places it in an exhibit titled Individuals Who Shaped Nuclear History, alongside artifacts from other Cold War incidents, a piece of the U-2 spy plane shot down over Cuba in 1962, an encryption device from the USS Pueblo, a fragment of the Berlin Wall. The placard beneath the watch reads, Poljot Strela chronograph worn by Soviet Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov on September 26, 1983, when he refused to report satellite detection of U.S. missile launches that proved to be false alarms. Petrov's decision potentially prevented nuclear war between the United States and Soviet Union. This watch measured the seconds during which he chose technical analysis over protocol compliance, individual judgment over institutional authority, uncertain restraint over certain catastrophe. Visitors stop at the display, read the placard, study the watch through the glass. The timepiece looks ordinary. Stainless steel case, white dial, black numerals, mechanical movement visible through the back. Nothing about it suggests world historical significance. It's just a watch, the kind Soviet officers received as retirement gifts or purchased at state stores for 127 rubles. But on September 26, 1983, its second hand swept through 240 seconds that separated civilization from annihilation. The museum exhibit includes a video screen showing interview footage of Petrov from 2006. In the clip, an interviewer asks, "When you looked at your watch during those minutes, what were you thinking?" Petrov, 67 years old, thin, wearing a gray cardigan in his Moscow apartment, considers the question for several seconds. Then he says, "I was thinking about time. How much time did I have to analyze the data? How much time before I had to make the decision? How much time would Moscow have if I was wrong? Time is what you have before the missiles arrive, before the bombs fall, before everything ends." I looked at my watch and thought, I have maybe 3 minutes to be right. 3 minutes to analyze satellite telemetry, check ground radar, assess probability. 3 minutes to decide if 280 million people live or die. He pauses. That's not enough time, but it's the time we had. The Cold War Museum exhibit frames Petrov's story as exceptional, a single individual whose judgment prevented catastrophe. But the deeper truth, the one that Petrov himself articulated in interviews before his death, is that his situation was not exceptional but systemic. Early warning systems guaranteed that someone, somewhere, sometime would face exactly his dilemma. Technological certainty contradicting human intuition, protocol demanding. Action, common sense suggesting caution. seconds available to decide between civilization and extinction. Petrov's uniqueness was not that he faced this scenario, but that he survived it psychologically intact enough to make the correct choice, and that the truth eventually emerged from classified archives. How many other officers faced similar moments and chose differently? How many false alarms occurred in systems we know nothing about? How many times did early warning fail safely, and how many times did failure approach disaster but retreat before consequences manifested? The historical record suggests at least 47 incidents between 1958 and 2023 where nuclear-armed nations experienced early warning false alarms, technical malfunctions, or ambiguous situations that created potential for unauthorized or accidental weapons use. Most involved computer errors, satellite malfunctions, or communication failures. Most were resolved through human intervention, duty officers who questioned automated conclusions, commanders who demanded verification, technicians who recognized system anomalies. These officers remain largely anonymous. Their decisions populate classified incident reports filed in government archives, read by security officials and military historians, never acknowledged publicly. Petrov stands out because his case became public, because journalists discovered it, because he lived long enough to receive recognition. The others stay hidden, protected by security classifications, institutional embarrassment, or simple bureaucratic neglect. But their collective story reveals the true architecture of nuclear deterrence. Not the strategic theories, not the delivery systems, not the command structures, but the individual human beings who must decide, in compressed moments of uncertainty, whether to trust the machines. These individuals operate under impossible constraints, protocol that demands immediate action, technology that claims infallibility, stakes that exceed comprehension, time that never suffices for confident analysis. They make decisions anyway, because the systems require it. Sometimes they choose correctly, preventing false alarm launches. Sometimes they choose incorrectly, but redundant safeguards catch the error. Sometimes rarely but documented, they choose correctly by accident or luck. The structure ensures that eventually, inevitably, someone will face Petrov's dilemma without his technical expertise, without his skepticism toward authority, without his moral courage to violate protocol. That person might wear a watch similar to Petrov's, might check the seconds ticking toward decision, might feel the weight of civilization pressing against their judgment. Or that person might trust the computer immediately, follow protocol precisely, initiate the communication sequence that cascades toward launch. We cannot know which choice they will make. We can only know that the systems guarantee someone will eventually face it. At Serpukhov 15, the bunker remains operational under Russian Strategic Rocket Forces control. The facility has been renovated extensively since 1983. New computer systems, upgraded communications, improved life support. The 3 radar screens that Petrov watched on September 26, 1983 were decommissioned in 1991 and sold for scrap. The red telephone that he didn't pick up was replaced in 1995 during communications modernization. Nothing physical remains from that night except the concrete walls and the memory of officers who served there. A single room preserves institutional history. On the wall hangs a photograph, the duty crew from September 26, 1983, posed in front of their stations. Petrov stands in the back row, 4th from left, young, unsmiling, his uniform crisp, his eyes focused on the camera with the same analytical intensity he would later apply to satellite telemetry showing 5 American missiles. Next to the photograph, a brass plaque reads, "In recognition of Lieutenant Colonel S.Y. Petrov and the officers of Bunker Oko 7 who maintained strategic vigilance during critical period of Cold War tensions." The plaque was installed in 2018, 1 year after Petrov's death. It mentions no specifics about September 26, 1983. It acknowledges no false alarm, no protocol violation, no decision that saved the world. Russian military authorities approved the plaque's wording carefully. Recognition without revelation, honor without embarrassment. Current duty officers at Serpukhov 15 know the story, passed informally among successive generations of early warning specialists. Young lieutenants working 12-hour shifts in the renovated bunker hear about Petrov from senior officers during slow nights. The story becomes legend, simplified and distorted through retelling. The officer who stopped nuclear war, the man who didn't trust the computer, the hero who saved everyone by doing nothing. But the legend misses the essential truth that Petrov himself tried to communicate in interviews. He didn't do nothing. He did something profoundly active. He analyzed, questioned, assessed, and decided based on technical understanding rather than institutional protocol. His inaction regarding the telephone was actually intense action in service of accurate threat assessment. He worked frantically to understand what the system was showing him, to correlate satellite data with ground radar, to determine whether 5 missiles represented genuine American attack or technological failure. The distinction matters because it defines what nuclear command systems require from human operators. Not passive obedience to computers, not unthinking implementation of protocol, but active engagement with technology, critical assessment of automated conclusions, willingness to doubt artificial certainty. These qualities cannot be programmed into software, cannot be mandated through regulation, cannot be guaranteed by training. They emerge from individual character, technical competence, and moral courage, precisely the qualities that institutions struggle to select for and preserve. Modern early warning systems attempt to solve this problem through redundancy and verification protocols, but redundancy cannot eliminate the fundamental vulnerability. Every automated system operates through software that contains errors, processes sensor data subject to interference, and makes probabilistic judgments that sometimes fail. Every verification protocol adds time delay that could prove fatal during genuine attack. The tension between speed and accuracy, between automation and human oversight, between trusting machines and trusting judgment, remains unresolved and perhaps unresolvable. The Polk Strela watch in the Virginia Museum measures this tension in seconds. 240 of them between alarm and decision, 1,680 between detection and stand-down, 86,400 in the day that could have been humanity's last. Time is the medium through which nuclear weapons operate. Flight time for missiles, response time for commanders, decision time for officers. Petrov's watch measured time running out while he decided whether to trust the system or trust himself. He chose himself. The choice proved correct. The world continued. But continuation depended on variables beyond Petrov's control. That the false alarm was obvious enough to detect through technical analysis, that ground radar provided contradictory data, that his expertise was sufficient to recognize system failure, that his courage was adequate to violate protocol, that his superiors ultimately accepted his decision. Change any of these variables, and September 26, 1983 becomes September 26th, the day humanity ended in thermonuclear fire triggered by sunlight reflecting off clouds. The watch now sits in the museum, frozen at an arbitrary time. The museum sets it to 12:14 a.m. for display purposes, measuring nothing, marking nothing, its mechanism wound periodically to keep the gears from seizing. Visitors photograph it, students sketch it for school reports, historians study it for documentaries. It becomes symbol and relic, representing the moment when one man's time-pressured judgment stood between civilization and extinction. But the deeper irony is that the watch was unnecessary. Petrov didn't need to check the time to know he had insufficient time for confident analysis. He didn't need the seconds measured out in mechanical precision to understand that his decision would be made under uncertainty. The watch was simply there, on his wrist, a gift from his father, a tool for marking duration during shifts at Serpukhov 15. Its significance emerged retroactively, assigned by historians seeking tangible objects to anchor intangible stories of crisis and decision. What actually mattered was inside Petrov's mind, the technical knowledge that allowed him to question the computer, the psychological constitution that allowed him to bear the weight of uncertainty, the moral framework that prioritized accurate assessment over bureaucratic safety. These qualities cannot be displayed in museum cases, cannot be photographed for newspapers, cannot be preserved in archives. They exist only in memory and consequence. The memory of what happened, the consequence of what didn't. On September 26, 1983, at 12:14 a.m. in a bunker 200 feet beneath birch trees losing their leaves to approaching autumn, a Soviet officer looked at his watch and decided he had enough time to think. That decision, more than treaties or summits or disarmament agreements, more than strategic theories or delivery systems or command structures, is why we're still here to know about it. The watch keeps ticking in its museum case. Measuring time, that means nothing. Marking duration in a world that almost stopped existing. Recording seconds that no longer matter because someone once understood that 3 minutes of careful thought outweighs 30 years of protocol.